You're listening to the Girl Dad Show.
Welcome to Season 3 of The Girl Dad Show, where we explore the intersection of parenthood and entrepreneurial spirit. Join me and some incredible guests as we share tips and tricks for finding work-life balance and making a positive impact not only on the world, but also our families. Let's create a fulfilling life together. It's The Girl Dad Show, Season 3. Dale, what's going on, brother? Thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Yo, I'm excited to be here, man. Appreciate you having me. And I'm just hanging out, chilling at a coffee shop.
I know, I see that. That's awesome. Which one are you at? Where are you at?
I moved to East Tennessee 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago now. And I'm from Orlando, Florida, 36 years. But I'm at a place called Remedy in Knoxville. So I get my Orlando, I guess you would say fix by coming to a somewhat big city, like the old Orlando. You know, when I was in Orlando as a kid, there was a couple 100,000 people in it. And now there's a couple million.
Oh, wow.
So here in Knoxville, there's only a couple 100,000 people. So I'm like, oh, this feels like home again. But the coffee is called Remedy. And my guys here make some pretty dope espresso.
Nice.
They know how I like it. So
I love it.
It's good
you
stuff.
Got your little spot too. I love it.
Yeah.
It looks super nice there too. Good workstation.
Yeah, it's a cool spot.
Are you like a nomad worker? Do you like to go to coffee stations to work, or is that your?
I definitely I'll work from the house, but I live on the side of a mountain, so I occasionally don't have any connection. Well, even if I use, so I got a Starlink just for that reason, but even if I'm using a Starlink, if there's too much cloud coverage or whatever the case, I have problems. So I just kind of float down in town and hang out with the locals and end up in all kinds of places. And then I do a lot of traveling for work, and then my wife and I are full on just travel weirdos. So we got a camper van, the whole 9 yards. We're trying to live that life. So, I'll be working in the middle of some state I've never heard of and that most people can't pronounce, in some city that people are like, where? Every once in a while. And that's kind of what feeds me and motivates me and keeps me excited and happy to work every day.
Yeah. And then does that work well with the Starlink? Has it been proving good for you when you go to these random places?
I haven't used the Roam yet. I own the Roam, but I haven't used the Roam yet for hitting the road with a camper van. That's on the docket for 2024. A lot, actually. We're going to try to travel as much as we possibly can next year and just see how well our boys do and how much we like it. But we already do a lot of traveling, and we have for the last about 17 years of our relationship. The first 3 years of our relationship were kind of at home, broke as a joke and not doing a whole lot of anything.
Yeah.
But for the last 17 years, we've done a lot of traveling. So we're trying to get back to that life after 2020, especially. They kind of cut us off from the international travel to an extent, but we're trying to enjoy that locally in the same vein, if you will. So
Totally. I totally dig that. I mean, my wife and I were talking about this pre-lockdown, right? The COVID pandemic. But we were trying to travel internationally twice a year and then domestically twice a year. More so because, same as you, we were trying to make it in our profession, so we had no money, so we couldn't travel. And then as we started to get a little bit more established, we had kids, and then now we could travel, and you had to make that decision: do you not travel or travel? And we wanted to go travel with the kids. And then we were thinking about how wildly different each state is domestically. And so we're you don't even really need to travel to another country, because you could go to Minnesota and it's wildly different than Texas. And you can go to Des Moines, Iowa, and it's just wait, what? It feels like other countries when you go to these other states sometimes,
You're spot on, bro. And it's the culture, it's the quaintness, it's just the general history of that state as well too. And the little cities are the best part too. I feel like too many people get sucked into the trap of going to Orlando or going to Atlanta or going to Nashville, and they don't recognize that there's a lot of really cool things to do, and you can have a whole lot of fun in these smaller places, especially places that challenge you to do something different. Yeah. And I'm not talking about skydiving, I'm just I'm talking about walking into a antique store that's been there for 110 years. You know, like
Nice.
there's like cool concepts around like just the way that people are living their lives, how they're making money, how they're thriving, how they're happy, you know, and how they fulfill that happiness on a daily basis that I don't know, I feel like we just disconnected from as people far too much. So I'm all about that life, bro. Right now I've done 49 of the 50 states. I'm missing Hawaii, which is crazy, right? Like every American has been to Hawaii for some reason, right? But apparently not me.
Yeah.
But I do have a lot of friends there, so when I'm finally there, it's gonna be dope. But I traveled all 50 states or 49 states inland because I played in a band, and so I did most of them during that time, and then my wife and I have done the ones that I never did, which are only a couple anyway. But in that time traveling with my band, I really like, man, I would go to places and be like, yo, I gotta come back here. I gotta come back here and eat. I gotta come back here and hang. I gotta come back here and meet more people. I gotta come back here. And that's kind of where the bug started. But, you know, as an adult, I haven't changed that part of it. I really do like the wonder of life a lot.
It's awesome, man. And I'm assuming that that's kind of why you're bringing the kids along, right? With this camper idea?
Yeah, the reason we're bringing the kids along is to, man, I really feel like I feel like society kind of sucks these days, and just being blunt. And yeah. I feel that we have created a culture of convenience, and that has dumbed people down to experiences and to risk and to rewards that come with said risk, and ultimately like personal development. Like, who is out there personally developing themselves? You know, the only time that we get personal development is when we pay some, you know, LinkedIn guru like myself to come out, you know, for 3 days in some kind of boot camp style, you know, workshop, and then we forget all about everything that person taught us anyway. Like the thing that I always admired about my father as an example is that he was just like always being better and getting better and doing it like in his own terms, on his own terms, and pursuing it on a daily basis. And, you know, to me, I learned a lot differently about the world and the way that the world works from my father and from my mom as well too. And I really want to focus on not saying things like, oh, you know, but my dad did these couple things I didn't like, and I never want to do that. And I mean, I think every kid feels that way about their parents to some extent. My dad was my best friend. He's my hero, my idol. But of course, like, I got a couple things that I'm like, come on, Dad, like, what was this about? But, you know, I also realize that that's my preference, my opinion, my experience. And so I'm trying to mold my kids not in a way where I make them something, but I'm trying to influence them in a way that they'll have choice when they're my age to say, well, I can be shackled to the world and the status quo and do things as they say, or I can live in ultimate freedom and I can live in happiness. And that to me is something we've gotten away from over the last 50, 60, 70 years, honestly. And, you know, instead we focused on get a job, work really hard, retire at 65. Like, what is that? Like, I don't even understand that, dude. So yeah, I know, like, a deeper answer to your little question, right? But like, that's why we're taking the kids out.
I love it, man. That's a really great answer, actually. And when did that hit you? I'm curious, because that kind of hit me really late in life. I turned, I think, 40 years old. It's like my midlife crisis, and I was like, wait, why am I working so hard again? Just to like try to save up enough to like live an okay life for the rest of my life. And God forbid I live past 90 because there's no savings left on my 401k. This is a terrible life. What am I doing? And I just like completely checked myself and moved from California to Texas, and had like this whole epiphany like 3 or 4 years ago. But when did that hit you? When did you realize this?
Yeah, I'll come back to being 27 years old, 26 years old. It was 2014 timeframe, and I was crushing it. The last couple of years, I just like unleashed the Kraken, as one of my best friends used to say, and I was just really thriving in sales, and copier sales specifically. And, you know, on the outside, and people would look at me and be like, "Yo, this dude's got it all together. He's really successful. He's doing a lot of great things." And look, I mean, I was. But I struggled with depression. At that point in my life, I was hiding it and masking it with supplementing it, I should say, like saying, and, you know, like, I'll just be angry behind the scenes, or You know, like I'll get into physical altercations with people to feed that part of me so that I don't commit suicide or feel depressed. And and then it got deeper. It was like, well, I'll supplement it with alcohol. I'll try drugs, see if that works. And a lot of people just didn't know what was going on. Not even my wife. And I became in that darkness and in that numbness. I became suicidal. And for the second time in my life, I tried to commit suicide. I did as a young teenager. As well too. My mom saved my life back then, and this last time, you know, this time that I had done it in 2014, it was divinity more than anything that saved me. It was literally like, you can't leave, bro. That's literally what happened, and it was an intense moment in my life, dude. And I as it should be, and for anybody, but I decided not to take it and make it like a negative for myself. It exposed a lot of things for me, like traumas and abuses that I'd suffered from that I'd never really talked about outside of just like my mom and my dad and maybe a therapist once or twice. And, you know, I started to be more vocal about my growth and where I was in life. And bro, I had $100,000 in my checking account, you know, when I literally tried to kill myself. And so I sit back and I think about that. I'm like, man, it's crazy how much we lie to people about what happiness is and what fulfillment is and what life should be. And look, there's a lot of stuff that was going behind the scenes, and there's a lot more to the story ultimately. But bottom line being that I realized that, like, bro, work isn't going to save me. And that I had to die to myself and that part of me that thought that I could like outwork my depression and find happiness somehow through, you know, like literal modern day slavery to money and corporations and someone else's dream. You know, it's not even mine. You know what I mean? And so at that state in my life, bro, it was like, game on, I'm going to live. And I remember my boss saying to me one time, even, he was like, why do you travel so much? He's like, you should be working and saving up money and getting to like 50 years old and then you can do whatever you want. I was like, nah, dude. Like, I shouldn't even be here right now. And because of that, I'm not gonna take that for granted. I'm not gonna focus on those things. I know how to make money. I know how to do that. Like, I'm not worried about that. I'll figure that out anytime, any place, at any point in my life. But I don't know what Knoxville, Tennessee looks like yet. You know, I don't know what some tiny little town in the middle of Ohio looks like yet, or the culture of the baker that's there and her story and her grandmother's recipes. And I don't know those things. And that makes me happy. And those experiences are what I want to seek out and thrive within. So I was really young. I've been about 11 years now that I've been just like
figuring this out,
living life in my own terms, bro. You know what I'm saying? But it's
more
still
than
a struggle.
your perspective is wildly different than my perspective, because you're looking at it from a point of like, I shouldn't even be here, and I'm here experiencing it. So you're really dialing into those microscopic experiences and learnings, and getting to know people and their thoughts and their livelihood. Can I probe a little bit? Like, can I ask a couple questions about like this experience that you went through? What happened? Like, so how did your wife react when she found out? How did she find out? And like, when did you share? Like, when did it all kind of fall apart and everyone kind of knew? And then, how old were your kids?
So I didn't have kids yet. I was, let's see, at this point we were almost 7 years married, 6 years married, somewhere in that time frame.
Yeah.
I had like just a slow drip basically of negativity, and I'd suffered from abuses early in my life that I hadn't fixed yet. Depression started around the time I was probably about 9 or 10 years old through some of those abuses that I suffered. And at 15 years old, like I said, I got to like a breaking point, and I was just a kid, and I tried to slit my wrists up, and I didn't know what I was doing, so I basically just mangled myself, for lack of a better term, and I didn't do like permanent damage, and most of the scarring is gone even. But you know, regardless, like that's where I was at. I was that sad, that depressed, didn't want to live anymore, and I was trying really hard to leave. And my mom she came home from work early that day and saved me, because I had to like not only like be confronted by another person in that moment, but I also had to like confront my problem for the first time. And it was it was a saving moment in my life for sure. And I, look, I pursued healing, and my parents helped me with that too. But I think that we've got a lot of that healing backwards in the way that we tell somebody like, yo, go get a therapist and that'll fix everything. That's not the case. Like, sure, a therapist is good without a doubt. But man, we put too much emphasis on like trusting other people with our own healing,
That's right.
and I needed to really like search within myself, and I needed to make hard decisions. And I was just a kid still though, right? So it's like, well, what decisions did you have to make, bro? And decisions I had to make was like how I was going to let my traumas and abuses affect me for the rest of my life. Like, that's what I had to figure out. And so by the time that I'm in my mid 20s, and I'm suddenly just crushing life, bro. I mean, my wife and I were doing really well at the time, as just the same, that there was these things in the back of my head that were saying like, your wife doesn't love you.
Holy
because
shit.
she doesn't, do X, Y, or Z, and I'm telling myself this. She's never saying this to my face. I'm not talking to her about it. I'm just like,
So you were cycling, like your brain was
bro.
finding your, okay, got it. You were like trying to like self-destruct, it sounds like.
It was happy, bro. And I think, here's the thing is, I think that most people, especially in relationships or marriages, like whether it's like sex or whether it's like a belief that you might have, like that they don't, that your spouse doesn't, like a lot of times we just ignore things. We think like, oh, well, they're just different than us, or, like this is what marriage is like, and at a very young age, bro, I found out that like, no, you got to talk a lot. You got to talk about things that are very uncomfortable, and you got to talk a lot. You got to talk often, man. I don't have any problem admitting this. I've told plenty of people, right? But only about 5 years ago, I sat down with my wife and talked deeply about my sexual traumas that I've been through as a child, and how they've affected me in my life, and how like pornography has played a part in that, and how I've had to conquer that as an adult, and and all the small struggles that go with that as well too. And as men, like, this is an embarrassing topic, or it's like if I'm an Andrew Tate person, like, oh, it's just masculinity in the flesh. It's like there are so many different toxic and just flat out wrong voices in society today that are telling men what they should be or shouldn't be. And for me, I had to figure these things out myself. And like, man, my wife was the healing force the whole time. Amazing. But I ran from that. I didn't want to tell her these things. I didn't want to confront this stuff. And so it got to a dark place. I would 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, I was like bloodthirsty for something that made me feel okay or like alive at all, because I was so numb, bro, that I'd make an $80,000 commission check after like 1 week's worth of work in my business, because I was really good, and still am really good, by the way, at sales. and I didn't even care. And because like, again, like the money stopped affecting me, and it was more or less like, am I liked by these people though? Am I loved by these people? Do I like them? Do I love them? I started to really get human with it, and it caused a lot of darkness to rise to the surface in that process. So like, I sought out, I had a anger issue that I really tapped into at that point in my life. And it was an anger issue that was like behind the scenes. And it came from years of defending myself and defending other people that were helpless. Like, I was always the guy in the neighborhood that if like, there was a nerd or a weirdo getting picked on, like Dale, who I was a jock, right? That's how I was labeled. I skateboarded, and nice. I played sports really well too. I was very good at sports, so I was very athletic. And so people looked at me as like kind of a cool kid or like a popular kid, but like, the nerd over here playing Pokemon cards is also my best friend. Yeah. And so when all the cool kids were picking on him, I'd throw fists, because I wanted that person to live a happy and fulfilled life and know that they were cherished and that they were worth something, right? So that turned into anger at this dark stage in my life. And then, other things arose in that. And really, like, any human is susceptible to the identity of supplementing happiness with a substance or an instance or a belief or a hobby that could be unhealthy for them. Right. Because like when it's unhealthy, usually it like makes you feel different. And that feeling of anything, It's not numbness. It's very attractive, even if it's wrong and you know it's wrong. So that, that's where I was, bro. And it was dark and it was intense. I went to the office one morning, playing the whole thing out, wrote a suicide note, everything. I mean, this story is out there and it circulates. And the reason I tell it, though, is because, man, I just want young men and young women to know that are in the same type of like high pressure, transactional type sales roles, or even just like in general in their life feeling lost or broken. You don't have to feel that way. And that there's people out here like me that will go and revisit those things to help. And even as hard as it is for me to do it, to help, because I really do believe that the only reason that I'm here today is because I've been called for something greater, because I shouldn't be here is the bottom line. And I've come to terms with like accepting that too, because that's a hard thing to think about, bro. Like, what, me? Like I'm worth something? That's not easy to think. Yeah. And so I have to constantly remind myself of that too. But my wife, my best friend, bro, she's been instrumental. My kids, my best friends, right? They're instrumental. I got a 5-month-old and a 5-year-old, just for context.
Yeah.
All right. So those are the things I latch to and just kind of like hang on.
Does your 5-year-old know any of this, or has an inkling or understanding of like, because it's fairly recent, right? I mean, like you're talking like you let your wife in, it sounds like, and then you had your first kid.
So we had our first kid in 2017. We got pregnant. He was born in 2018. So it was about 4 years later. Oh, but my son has been through, like I have had a third stint with suicidal ideation. I did it in 2021, and my son was around for the whole thing. But this time I was very vocal about it. I didn't hide nothing. I was like, I'm in that place again, and I don't even know how I'm here. And I need healing, and I need prayer, and I need help. I need intervention. And I sought it in 30 days, bro. I battled extraordinarily hard, but I found all the clarity I needed. And my son is instrumental in that, dude, without a doubt. He's instrumental. Like his laugh, his hug, his kiss, his eyes, his touch, like everything about helped me tremendously during that time. And my wife as well, too. And then there was always kind of this void of like, we felt like a complete family, but that we were called for something more to some extent. And we were gifted another son just 5 months ago, 6 months ago, So now the family feels very complete. And our move to Tennessee is, part of that journey of darkness and depression and my struggles. And so we're pursuing a different type of life. I'm not going to sit in a doctor's office every day for the rest of my life, taking medication, basically numbing and drowning my true self out to deal with something. I'm going to fight it face forward, girl. I'm going to put my hands up and turn the other cheek in the process too.
Yeah, that's a really good mindset. And I'm really, really impressed with your wife as well too. But it sounds like she was always there and ready, and you just didn't let her in. If I can kind of talk more directly about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because it sounds like from what you're saying, the moment you did let her in, she was instrumental in kind of helping you understand the value and the clarity and helping you work through this stuff. What does she do, if you don't mind me asking?
That's the best part, bro. She's a trained psychologist and a neuropsychometrist by trade.
Oh, wow.
In her profession. So she's actually the person that helped me the best in my sales career to like understand personalities, habits, basic human characteristics and traits, basic human functions and communication. And so she
armed you
right?
with the hard skills to be a good salesperson.
Right. And those same skills are just very human, is the thought. It's like they're very human. And so it, ultimately, like those things that she taught me and that expertise that she had was also instrumental in me like developing interpersonal skills and like self-talk and worth and that was sort of inadvertently done, right? Because I was just like reading her textbooks and like listening to her stories and asking like, well, what the heck? Like, so when someone's lying like that, what do you do? And, so there was some really good moments in my life that, I just never forget that like really helped me to think differently. But man, I'll tell you right now, like anybody out there that denies it, like the hardest person in the world to talk to, bro, is your wife. If you love her, if you're a man, because you know, in your head you're always going to tell yourself like, I'm better than this, and this means I failed, this means that she can't love me as like a provider, or you know, anything other than just being like somebody that sucks. And look, like it, any man in any relationship, I should say as well too, probably struggles with talking to their significant other to any capacity, because it's like, it's not inherent with, and society does not tell us to go and open up about these things. It recently we talked more about things like mental health, but we still talk about the surface of it.
Yeah.
We're like, hey, take a mental health day. It's like, you know what? But what does a mental health day look like? And what are you struggling with? Is it, how dark is your mental health, your state of mental health in the first place? Is it just because you feel off because there's bad things happening in the world, or do you literally want to die and not live? And like, you know, we just skirt around those issues too much. And I think it makes it harder for men to be more transparent and open with their significant other.
It's so much truth in that, man. And I think it's like one of the things that I'm like, you know, learning about myself as well. And hopefully in this show is like trying to talk to like, you know, more people that are trying to battle this kind of dichotomy of building a, you know, a new type of family in this modern age with, you know, building a really successful career in this modern age. But I'll tell you, even beyond the macro, just you even saying like struggling with talking to your wife, I literally had a fight or flight moment in my gut. And I'm like, yeah, I totally struggle with talking to my wife about anything, you know? I was almost like, oh gosh, yeah, I struggle with that really badly, right? Like how do I share with her all these things that I'm actually feeling or thinking and I'm struggling with, and what is she going to think about that? And is that even worth it? Is she going to ask more questions? Do I want to explain that? Is it going to make me look weak? Like a million questions just like drilled into my brain like a screwdriver as soon as you said that. And I'm just like, oh crap, that's absolutely accurate to me as well. And so obviously you're talking more in the macro, but even anecdotally, I totally feel that. I feel like there's a huge hardship for men in general to do that, you know, and open up and talk about those things. And I'm not really sure where that fear comes from, and that's just, maybe it's societal, maybe it's functional. I'm not really entirely sure, but it definitely is illogical when you say it like that. It's very, very illogical. This episode of The Girl Dad Show is brought to you by Owners Club. As a business owner myself, I know firsthand how challenging the journey can be. Whether it's having someone that I can ask a very tactical question to, or just being able to share my big successes without guilt. Building a business is a lonely journey, and it does not have to be. After building and coaching dozens of businesses to success, there is one insight that is so obvious and simple, yet hard to execute. And that is network equals net worth. And so if you're a growth-minded, supportive, smart, and hardworking business owner looking for a community of like-minded entrepreneurs to build with, look no further than the Owners Club. You will make lifelong friends and build your business that works for you. You can learn more online at owners.club.
Yeah, I haven't really like figured it out either. I think it just comes from years of people wanting to correct their problems and tap into like more of like this ancestral or like lineage type of typical outcome. Like, how did men deal with this kind of stuff in the Roman times, and Jesus was walking the earth? You know, it's like we typically tend to go in those directions, but what's interesting is like as you learn about that kind of like the history of men and how they dealt with their problems, it's like it's nowhere to be found, bro. It's not even in the. It's like, wait a second. It like really what we're telling people is that like men don't have this problem is what we're talking about here. So I think that's the issue, is that there is no like origin of, you know, hey, what's going on and what's wrong. Matter of fact, I just saw recently I saw a TikTok that somebody sent to me that I thought was fantastic. It's a picture. It's a picture of a dad and his son, and they're sitting in kind of like a dreary looking room, and the dad's holding a cup and it says like world's best dad on it, and he looks sad and he's kind of sitting with his boy, and you scroll over and there's a poem and it's written like from the boy to the dad, and it's like, Dad, why are you sad, basically. And it's like it talks about like the grit of his father. He's like, my dad goes to the coal mines, and like, you know, basically makes him feel like he's a superhero, right? Like he never gets hurt, he stands in like the middle of an open flame and comes back without burns. And there's all these things that just make him. He's like, why are you so sad? I don't understand why you're so sad. Mom gave you this cup that says the world's best dad. What's wrong? And then it's the son older, and he's now the father, and he has a wife of his own, and he writes another poem, and it's like all the things he's saying about his dad that he thought, made him untouchable and unbreakable. And he's realizing, he's like, well, now I'm in the coal mine and I feel the heat and I realize that it's too much. And he's like, and now, and I got a mug that says world's best dad too, from a wife that told me that nobody loves me because I'm never here and I work too much. So how am I supposed to feel about that cup? And you read this, and like literally it ends with like, and so I'll stay silent and pass this down to the next. And I'm reading this just like, man, like this is the issue, right? Is that like we believe that somehow like as men that it is our role or our calling to just be quiet and just go, like do what needs to be done and do what's necessary. And like to some extent, like silence is okay, but silence on like when you have an opinion, like don't be afraid to be wrong. Don't be afraid to let other people be right. Don't be afraid to lead that way. But never is it okay when like the issues are that big for you to just be quiet about it. Like that's the problem.
Yeah, we just accept it. That's what you're saying when you say society puts this kind of infrastructure around us. We just kind of accepted it, and that's part of the society that you're talking about. It's very, very interesting, man. You're a philosopher. I love it. I freaking love it. Talk to me a little bit about the travel thing again. So is this the new idea is to like, you have a lot of new perspectives. It sounds like you've opened and closed a lot of chapters in your book. And this new chapter, talk to me about it. What does success look like for you as it relates to, traveling with your family and working and making, I'm assuming still making good money, being a great salesperson, but like, what does that look like? What is your kind of like goals now for the next chapter of your book here?
It's a great question. I'm living it right now, right? So I started with, years ago, I started with saying, you know what? We don't need anything anymore. And this is what I mean by that is I realized, and early in this conversation, I mentioned it, I realized at a certain point that, wow, I have like too much dependence on convenience. Like it's really easy for me to just like pop open my phone and be like, hey, I need some pizza. And it's really, and then I can walk right down the street to anything I want.
Yeah.
Like I like literally, like I can go get coffee down the street. I can go get a burger down the street. I can go do yoga down the street. Like I lived in a place called College Park in Orlando. If anybody wants to look it up, it's like one of the oldest towns in Orlando. And it's where like the most elite and wealthiest and most established people are in the area. And that slowly has changed over time. There's places like Claremont that you can buy like 7 acres of land for the same price as you can buy a house, like in College Park. So people got smart, obviously, as well, too, and maximized their dollar, right? But I digress. The thought is that I realized like this isn't even like a community anymore. It's just a big, giant convenience is what I live in. And I started to realize like how lazy that makes me in a lot of different aspects of life. And so does this to people in general, in my opinion. But no, I just kind of like analyzed that side first and thought, well, what would I do if I couldn't like call a Lyft right now or have some food delivered to me right now? Like, what would I do? And I started to realize like, man, we really don't realize how much these things are messing us up. That I have, even though I'm the best with time management skills and like I've lost those skills, right? Like that's how I see it, at least, like maybe I still have to some extent, especially now, right? But at the time I started realizing like, I don't have to worry so much about a lot of things that I used to because it's all right here at my fingertips. Like I don't need to worry about it. But then I started saying to myself, like, what is that causing for me? Like, is it making me too dependent on tech, on other people, on, everything. And that dependency is what really started that process. So my wife and I, we decided in 2021, like, we just need a break. I'm starting to feel a little heavy around my depression, and I think we just need to get out, get on the road, go and travel, see what happens. And so that's where the journey begins. And we did about 6 states, 7 states, end up in New York, and not New York City either. We ended up in a place called Lansing. This is where my life changed. And it's right outside of Ithaca. It's about 30 minutes. It's in the middle of nowhere. There's
that's
pretty
really
much
up
nothing
north.
there.
Yeah.
So you have these cool spots like the Finger Lakes where you can go and pop into the wineries and get some good, like fresh farm to table food here and there. But like, you have to commit to that. It's a 30-minute drive anywhere to get to like the first place, and to get groceries, to get coffee, to get lunch, it's 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So being up there, what we learned was like, we got back to these ways of like being responsible with our time, being good stewards, doing everything in excellence. And just, we're looking at home and at Orlando and going, man, this place really has been a blessing and changed us. We need to find a place like this that's not New York for several reasons. One being the distance, like we wanted to get a little bit closer back to Florida because I'm from there and all my family's there. But we need a place like this that can heal us like this, that takes us away from the conveniences and makes us commit to our lives differently. And so, bro, we sold it all. Everything. Homes, everything. Stuff. Like 90% of the stuff we owned, I call it stuff, right? Y'all call it couches and clothing, and I call it stuff. It's meaningless. We just basically got rid of it. Like literally.
Wow.
And man, it was freeing. It was so freeing. What a feeling, bro. I left a house, like I left a home that has a story too. It's not just like I left this stuff, right? My dad bought the house that I lived in 1984. He built it to accommodate a family of 4, which he had. He held on to it all the way to his dying breath, bro. And it was his last debt. And in 2017, I bought it. I said, I'll take the house. I literally scribed my dad's initials and mine and my son's into the driveway. Even it was like, I got it from my dad. My son will get it from me, and he'll pass it to his kid, or he'll sell it and make a lot of money. We'll see what happens. And that was my mindset. Like, and it was all legacy based. It was like, how do I honor my dad? How do I keep him, in my life? And I realized how toxic that was too, bro, that I was trying to keep my dead father alive and not letting him rest and have peace. But instead I used it as a crutch, and it became a burden on my heart, on my soul, on my life. And it became an excuse to stay in that place as well too. And it was hard, bro, but I let it go. And like the final day in that place it's an experience I'll never forget. Like the whole life was in that home, except when I left in 2007 until 2017 when I bought it. Right. So when I became an adult and left, and then my dad died and I decided to buy it. Right. So I watched my literal life like flash before my eyes that I had in that house when I left it. And I felt, a spiritual release and permission to go. It was intense. And it was all decision based, right? Like ultimately it's not just about like this idea of like, oh, I sold the house and then my life flashed before my eyes. It was like why I'm leaving and what I'm venturing out on. Like I'm going to a place where I know nobody. I have no roots, right? I have like vacations up here with my mom and dad. That was about it. And I was taking a big risk in doing so. And in the process of that, my wife and I also said, hey, let's buy a camper van. Let's let that be our asset. You're going to build a cabin up here too. Right now, we're just renting, bro. Like I'm doing all the things that everybody says not to do because, excuse my French, but F the world and all the things that the world tells us is normal or it is what we have to do.
Yeah.
Screw that, bro. Like, what about me and my happiness? You don't know me. You don't know my struggles. You can pretend like you do, world, but you don't. And anything that manufactures is typically, from my experience, a lie in regards to like why it's good or why it's bad. So we did that, and at this point it's more or less like from a travel perspective with the family, it's like, how do we teach our kids like life differently? How do we teach them like not to grow up in this nice, quaint little bubble with all these conveniences, but like show them homelessness, show them small towns where people work at hardware stores their whole life, show them the passion that those people also had too, like at the little restaurant around the corner that's like third generation that does, like $50,000 a year. But for some reason, these people keep them open, and keep doing them. Like, how do we help the kids to learn, what it really looks like to live? And we believe that travel is the best way to do that, and meeting strangers and going to all these cities. And so I know it's a long answer to that short question, bro, but that's the full scope of why we're doing what we're doing. And we're still like, honestly, bro, we're still getting into it, right? Like we get in the Honda Pilot all the time. We converted the Pilot to be able to travel with the dogs, with the kids.
Nice.
So we got a rack on the top, the whole 9 yards, right? So we travel in that constantly, but with the van, it's like, we're still figuring that out ultimately. Like the van's dope. It's got a bathroom, a shower, all self-sustainable. It runs off solar. But, we're still like getting to that side of life. Like next year's the start. We're going to do like anywhere between 3 and 4 months, basically on the road with the Roam, with the Elon Musk technology that I was calling Starlink. Yeah. So it should be a good time, bro. But we're literally still like in that transition of doing these things
figuring it
as
out.
I speak.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love this new chapter goal. I think it's a very, very unique perspective, and in a lot of ways, I'm inspired, and in a lot of ways, I'm very validated. I mean, I grew up in San Francisco, so I kind of grew up in this like hyper vortex of Silicon Valley and just kind of like tech and growth. And then I moved into small town Texas 3 years ago when I had my kind of breakdown. And I'm kind of living what you just said to a certain degree. Nothing's close. Everything's 30 minutes away. We just got our first Starbucks like last year, and everything is like inconvenient, right? And it's been like one of the best things for me. It just slows everything down, and instead of like worrying about crazy stuff, my kids are now grabbing baskets and going in the backyard and picking up frogs and crickets, and it's just a different kind of like life. It's not necessarily better or worse, but it definitely has like changed my perspective, and it's making me a lot happier. So I'm feeling a lot more validated hearing you talk, but I don't think I've gone far enough, because I actually agree with almost everything you're saying. Like you just like did the Mel Gibson freedom line in the Braveheart movie there for me, and I'm like sitting here just like, yeah, F the world. We should totally be doing that. We should be thinking about the world like that. And it's so funny because you mentioned the thing about like everyone telling you to do the normal things so that you have, the time and the ability when you're older to go do the things that you're happy with. But it's like nonsensical now. I mean, that doesn't make any sense anymore, because I don't know if you've heard this, but there's like this whole adage that our generation is kind of like the first generation that's going to have, our parents live to about 100. Or, I mean, obviously, not all, but the reality is a lot of us are going to be taking care of our parents now when we turn 50, 60. And so that's like a lot of my friends are already doing that. Like they're already starting to take care of their parents, where you don't even get those golden years to go do that. And then the second thing is like, with what money? It's not like it used to be, where that money went so far and you could like, have this retirement and kind of do things. And now you're old and you're tired, and it's harder to do things, and it costs more to do things. And so you're going to miss out on everything in life, and you're just literally doing this exact thing that you're talking about. It's making me really, really like thoughtful about what I'm doing right now with my life. And I may just like buy a camper van as well and join you on this crusade. We should do this. Yes, this is
anytime, man. We'll meet up anytime.
Yeah,
anytime.
Seriously. I have 2 girls, 4 and 6, so around the same age, and it's incredibly hard to like think about all the things that you're talking about, and you articulate it so well, and you're so thoughtful about it for obvious reasons. You've gone through a lot of death and emotions, and life has just literally smacked you around a lot, and so it's kind of forced you to have these perspectives. But it's incredibly great to hear you talk about it so articulately and eloquently, because even though I haven't had those experiences, I feel everything you're saying. Like it's deep in my heart and gut, and I totally understand what you're saying, and I've never been able to express it the way you just talked about it, and it's quite beautiful, man. So thank you for taking the time to share and talk about it.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to do just that. So thank you for the platform to speak and tell my story.
Yeah,
Grateful.
I love it. Can I switch gears a little, because I do want to be conscious of your time, and I do like to ask some. They seem very trivial now, but I would like to ask some of my rapid fire questions.
Yeah, man.
For every guest, and I apologize for just the triviality of it, but it's just something that I do for every guest. So I would love to still follow the thesis, if that's okay.
Of course.
All right. So, what advice do you have for parents and soon-to-be parents?
I only have one piece of advice I'd like to give to any form of a parent, new, old, especially when they're asking me things like, how do I do this with my kids? How do I do that with my kids? The one piece of advice, and it's the one thing that I realized my dad did for me really well as I got older, which is to be the path of least resistance. There's a man named Dale Dupree out there. The first time I actually ever heard it termed like that was with him. But I remember when he said it, I was like, man, that's exactly how my dad raised me. I went to my dad and said, hey, I'm not going to go to college. I'm not going to take on any of these scholarships. I'm not going to do sports. I'm going to play in a band right out of high school, and I'm going to tour the world and get signed to a label. We're not signed yet, but we're going to be. Don't worry. And I remember my dad just going, all right. There's least resistance.
Yeah.
The fruit in that is that I could come to him and I could ask him things. Even if I knew that he didn't agree with something, I wasn't afraid. And that's the number one advice I get to any parent, anytime, any place, anywhere. Be the path of least resistance to your children.
That's really good advice. Yeah. That's really, really good advice. What's the most surprising thing that you've learned about yourself after becoming a parent?
You know what's interesting is I think people knew this about me, how patient I am. I don't think I really truly knew it about myself until after I became a parent, where I would be in the middle of a situation and go damn, you're patient. That's wild. I kind of had an epiphany around it, and it's actually helped me to also realize how good I am at it, to be more aware of it. Even might sound crazy, but now I'm even more aware of it. So I have more patience in a lot of things. And in my sales walk, where that transpires the most, is not just playing the long game, but let's just say I'm in an interaction with a human, and I just asked a question and they haven't answered it. I'll just be quiet. Or I put something out there and I don't like their answer. I'll just be quiet. And eventually on the other side of the phone, hear a hello. I'm here. I just was waiting for you to tell me what I asked. So I found that patience piece connects me with people a lot better as well too. I would encourage anybody out there listening that's I'm not a patient person, to not say that about yourself, and instead say I desire to pursue patience.
Yeah.
Because there's a stoicness in patience that men and women can acquire for themselves that allows them to be a better leader on all fronts. Change other people's lives. Your patience will.
Yeah, and then I just have to ask, for selfish reasons, does that actually work on the sales side?
Yeah.
Okay. Crap. Okay, because then I definitely need to work on that, because I'm a terrible salesperson. And I think it's because I'm so impatient,
No doubt.
I get super awkward.
The majority of humans are impatient.
Yeah.
And like we talked about, when everything is a convenience, it's hard not to be, anything but impatient.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
that's right.
We all struggle with it, bro.
Yeah, thanks for that. If you can go back and tell yourself one thing before having kids, what would you tell yourself?
Nothing. I would be two reasons. One, nobody takes advice about this kind of stuff. And even if you're man, that's good advice, you're never going to do it. You're never going to remember it. You're never going to try it. That's the truth. And because we live our own lives. We do what we want to do no matter what. Even if we're paying somebody to tell us to do something different, we're still going to do it our way,
Oh man, that's crazy.
So I wouldn't tell myself shit, because I wouldn't listen in the first place, but also because I think it's really important that like if I were to go back and stop myself from doing something, I think that's a travesty. I think it's really important that we have these failure moments. I think it's really important that we do things the wrong way, even if they're inches from becoming detrimental, because as a person that literally should not be alive today because of my own actions and getting right to the very literal end and still being here today, I realize that in most cases in our lives, the things that we think are a big deal, they're not going to kill you. And because of that, they become some of the best learning moments in our lives, because we never want to go back to those places, and ultimately they can be fixed. Mm-hmm. And if you remember that and believe it, that you're never going to worry about the choices you're making and what you could have done different. Instead, you're going to be present in the moment, intentional in the moment. And what happens is going to teach you, good or bad.
Oh, I love it. That's cool, man. All right, so let's switch gears a little bit to something a little bit more fun. Do you have a favorite book or a favorite business book? It could be any book in your case, because I'm actually curious.
My favorite book is Blue Like Jazz by Donald Miller. I find that most people haven't read it. It actually brought my wife to Christ and into faith. And that wasn't the purpose of it. She just like read it and like became very religious and spiritual because of it. And it changed our relationship enormously. And that book is the first book that always comes to mind when I think about my favorite book. And honestly, what's funny is I don't read business books. I don't read sales books. The only ones I read are by Stu Heineck. He's my favorite author. That guy gets me. He's very creative. He's very fun. He loves like wild, zany marketing, which is what I'm all about. What the Sales Rebellion even is, my company. So I'll read his books any day, but everybody else, man, a long time ago, I started reading their books and stopped reading their ideas and stopped letting someone else tell me how to do it and started figuring out how to do it myself. But I love a great science fiction novel, and I love Blue Like Jazz by Donald Miller.
Is that the same Donald Miller as the Story Brand book? No kidding. Yeah. I had no idea he wrote that book. I'll have to go check it out. That's very, very interesting.
He's got a lot of books that people don't know about, honestly.
Oh, really? I only know 2. He has more than 2, huh? Oh, that's really good to know. I do have a personal question before you go.
Yeah, for sure.
So I didn't even get to ask because I got so captivated by your story. What is it that you do? What is your, like, what do you actually, like, what's your business?
So the Sales Rebellion, I spent 13 years selling copiers, and the Sales Rebellion is kind of the culmination of that, where I wasn't your run-of-the-mill copier salesperson. Like, I like dressed like this when I walked into billion-dollar firms and like wore hats that said the Copier Warrior on them because I branded myself. So I had this whole personal brand perspective, and I started that movement and most of the circles that I was in, because this was 2010 when I began that part of my process. And I became very famous for this thing called the crumpled letter locally. I used to ball up a piece of paper and it had this message on it to like a CEO or a CFO that said, hey, you're probably wondering why this is all crumpled up. 90% of the sales and marketing to get is trash and you throw it away. So I made it easier to do that because I valued my time. And so that like whole concept of like infusing humor, familiarity, but also like creativity and relevance into the way that we do a gimmick. Because I realized like it's kind of a lot of the ideas that were out there were kind of dumb. Like, I'm going to send somebody a shoe and tell them now that I got a foot in the door. It's like, it's almost like cheap. You know, like what's something, how could I like talk shit about myself even like to some extent and be like, what do you think? And so it made me more relatable, more authentic. And I have hundreds of ideas like that got me, you know, made me millions of dollars selling copiers. And I basically woke up in a corporate role making 7 figures. And my boss called me a cocksucker the day before. That same boss told me when I had my first son to come back to work, like literally 2 days after he was born. Hey, I need you to come back to work. And I was like, what? And he goes, yeah, we checked on your vacation days anyway. And you were 1.6 hours from earning your vacation at this point, the days that you took. So I need you to just come back. And I was like, I got to get out of this place. So it motivated me to do something on my own. And the Sales Rebellion is literally birthed from that. Like I exist to change the game in sales. We do things like put people over products, community over commissions. We believe in giving experiences instead of like mass dialing and pitching people. And that's what we do. We train, we develop, we do workshops. I do public speaking. I'm an author. I got 2 books. I got a kid's book and then like a sales book that I don't read.
Yeah.
A business book.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
That's amazing. So you teach sales?
Yes.
Oh gosh, I got to take your class then. I got to learn from you because I suck at sales. I need to learn. Amazing. Okay, to bring us home, when you're not building out this new life for your family and being a philosopher of the modern age, what does Dale do for fun? What's your downtime activities?
Man, I tell you, like I don't really have like breaks or downtime activities in my life. Like my kids and my wife would actually be here right now if we didn't have some stuff that we're doing later. And some of my family is up on the mountain hanging out that are up from Florida. So like my family's always with me for the most part. I'm always doing something. And like the things that fill me up are them. So if they're sitting here to my left and we're working and I'm working, I'm full, bro. I'm being filled up every second. And so for me, anything I do, if I incorporate my family, that's what life is all about. So like simply put, something that I crave is just like being in like a historic downtown where like 20 people are like period. And that's like all the shops, like there's just like a person in each one. Nobody's even like really like hanging out. And I love walking down the sidewalk, looking back and seeing my son, my youngest in the stroller, my wife pushing him, and my oldest son holding my hand, skipping, right? Like just literally walking down the sidewalk, like enjoying the old time feel, the scenery, the questioning, like what's this mural and how old's this building, and the conversations that come from that. Like I'm a simple man, and it literally is just like based around being with my family. If they're around me, bro, that's what drives me and fuels me, and that's where I like to be.
I love it. Hey, Dale, thank you so much for taking the time to be on my show. I'm like so inspired and moved by your story. I am so glad that we got to know each other on the show and didn't do any kind of pre-interview, because this was a phenomenal experience for me. And I know you said that, it's hard for people to listen to other people and make changes, but I think you may be wrong, man. I'm actually pretty darn inspired right now, and I may mark this episode as a special one that I actually try to take notes from and learn from. So thank you again for being on the show.
Yeah, bro. My pleasure. My honor. Thank you for having me.
All right. We'll talk soon, brother. Thanks.
Cheers.
This episode of The Girl Dad Show is brought to you by you. We have been working very hard to bring you the best guests and content to the show and have been steadily growing month over month. And we're finally ready to start talking to businesses that want to partner with us to promote on our show. So if you know anyone that would be interested in having me promote their business on The Girl Dad Show, please email us at young@thegirldadshow.com. Thank you for your support and look forward to learning how to be a great parent together.